Welcome to Moment of Clarity. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for being here. I got a big show. Have I ever said that before? I got a big show for you today. No, it's one of these. Unfortunately, it's one of these shows where I everything I've slated to cover, I'm not going to be able to cover. So I'm going to try to get to it all, but I'm going to fucking fail. So you are not going to get everything that you should because there's too much awesomeness in this episode. And by awesomeness, I mean shitty stuff going on around the world. Isn't that exciting? Thanks for being here. Please click subscribe, click thumbs up, do all that stuff. Click, share it, all those good things. Might even have a big guest coming up in a few minutes if that works out. So, but yes, I'm going to talk about how the progressive Dems have already retracted their incredibly weak statement on peace, on creating peace in Ukraine. They already were pressured into retracting it. There's some really sad and hilarious details about that. If I have time, I'll tell you a little bit about my meeting with Julian Assange's father yesterday. I've got information on Iran, information on what else we got? I got new episode of the Most Censored News. I'll be playing that at the end of the episode. So a lot going on here. All right, well, let's start off with what just went down with the progressive Dems, if you can call them that. I will use the term progressive. I have accepted that it means fucking nothing anymore. So just because I call them the progressive Dems or the progressive caucus, funny that I stutter there. The progressive cock. Just because I call them the progressive cock, just because I call them, it's applicable that they're the progressive caucus because they give us the cock, so they cock us. So it's a one way of saying people fuck you, right? They've been caucusing us. They've been cocking us. So I will call them that, even though the word progressive means nothing. Progressive to what? Compared to what? Like in every way, you are not progressive. But anyway, I will call them that anyway. So 2 days ago or a day and a half ago, it all happened so fast. I can't even keep track. Everybody's head is left spinning. And it also tells you, this is why I want to talk about it, is not just because it's a thing that every internet show is talking about, but because it also shows a lot about how our system works. It really does. All right. So Pramila Jayapal, she's the head of the Progressive Caucus in Congress. And so she puts out a statement. I'm going to show you the statement here. She and these other 30 that have signed on to this put out a statement to the president that they make public. So it's a public statement, but it's directed to Joe Biden. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it says, we write with the, and first of all, it starts off, here's the thing, is I'd be making fun of this even if they didn't retract it. Just the fact that it took them 7 months to say in a diluted, sad way what true peace activists have been saying since day one. Since day one, we've all been screaming. I mean, those of if you watch people that haven't been screaming this, then fucking stop watching them. But we've all been screaming that the way to end this is with diplomacy, not fucking arming Nazis or whatever the fuck, not blowing up oil pipelines and blowing up bridges and pushing us towards nuclear war. None of that is the way to end this. The way to end this is by sitting down and fucking coming to an answer with Russia, with Ukraine, with whoever else is involved in our proxy war there. But we don't want that. We want this to go on for as long as possible. We view it as draining Russia and separating them from the global community. So we view this as a successful thing to do. So anyway, they put out this letter to say to Biden that there should be some diplomacy. And I just want to read you a little bit. We write with appreciation for your commitment to Ukraine's legitimate struggle against Russia's war of aggression. And, you know, they're like, your support for the self-defense of an independent, sovereign, and democratic state has been supported by Congress, including through various appropriations of military, and your administration's policy was critical to enable the Ukrainian people. So you get the idea. They spend the first part of this letter just fawning over our proxy war, how great it is, how wonderful that America is sending billions of dollars, literally tens of billions of dollars of military, quote unquote, aid to Ukraine. By the way, even CBS reported that 70% of that doesn't get to the front lines anyway. It ends up being sold on the black market. So really, that means the vast majority of that tens of billions of dollars of military, quote unquote, aid goes to what we call terrorists or whoever else that can pay $20,000 for a missile. 70%, way more than half. But then they get down and, they continue to do this whole like, oh, you're doing so great. Thank you for doing this. It's, so important and wonderful. But then they eventually say in this long-winded letter that there should be diplomacy. It was this big statement, 30 members of Congress. There should be diplomacy. We should sit down and speak to Russia directly and hammer this out and end this insane war. They don't say insane. And so in their weakest, most diluted 7-month late letter to Biden, they say there should be diplomacy. Now, in the slightest of ways, I was saying this is a positive because they're saying something that they should have been saying for the past 7 months. And finally, some of them came forward. And to go, let's see, so Pramila Jayapal was the main signatory. You got Jesus Garcia, Ro Khanna, Barbara Lee, Ilhan Omar, Ayanna Pressley, Sheila Jackson-Lee, Mark Pocan, Gwen Moore, Rashida Tlaib, AOC, Jamal Bowman, and several others, Jamie Raskin. So then you would think this is one of these rare moments where progressives have actually done something progressive, even though it's 7 months too late. Here they are, finally saying something progressive, saying Biden should sit down and end this proxy war, even though they did it in their diluted, pathetic way. So then within a few hours, they're forced to put out a clarification letter that you can see here. Congressional Progressive Caucus Chair reaffirms support for Ukraine, clarifies call for diplomacy. Like, as if their first letter didn't reaffirm their support for Ukraine. Like, it was fawning garbage. Anyway, in a letter to President Biden today, my colleagues and I advocate for the administration to continue ongoing military and economic support for Ukrainians while pursuing diplomatic support. So that key word is the only difference between like Biden's approach and what these so-called progressives are asking for is the word diplomacy anywhere in it. So they say there should be a diplomatic. Diplomacy is an important tool that can save lives, but it's just one tool, they say. As we also made explicitly clear in our letter, and we'll continue to make clear, we support President Biden administration about Ukraine without Ukraine. And even this was just sad to see. This is before the retraction. This is just pathetic because their initial letter already said that, and they've already been pressured by our ruling class, by corporate America, into clarifying that letter that sheepishly said maybe there should be diplomacy. But it gets worse. Then, not that long after that, they retract the entire letter. They back off of all of that, which it's just so the reason this is important is because it shows how our system works. It shows how even the slightest, weakest, limpest defense of diplomacy, defense of some sort of peace is abandoned. Even that, and this was nothing to begin with, but even that is too much for our belligerent, war-hungry system that is not run by these people, that is not run by anyone in Congress. Keep in mind, Congress no longer declares any wars. They no longer sign off on most of our military destruction. So they're borderline meaningless. But here they are. Progressive Democrats, this is from The Guardian, progressive Democrats retract Biden-Ukraine letter after a furious debate. Yeah, right, furious debate. The chair of the Progressive Caucus of the U.S. House of Representatives, Pramila Jayapal, has retracted a letter sent by 30 of the members urging Joe Biden to engage in direct talks with Russia to end the war in Ukraine following a heated debate with the Democratic Party about future strategy over the conflict. Jayapal made a dramatic U-turn, scrapping the letter that had been sent to the White House the previous day. They were able to keep their spine for about 12 hours. And implying it had all been a mistake. This might be my favorite part. They didn't just say, hey, we're gonna talk about this behind closed doors, but ignore that letter. Instead, they try to pretend they didn't mean to send it, which is like mind-blowing. They say she said the letter was drafted several months ago, but unfortunately was released by staff without vetting. Okay, first of all, can you imagine Pramila Jayapal, who signed that, was the lead on it, and put it out there not approving it being sent out? I can guarantee you that she approved it being sent out. Secondly, the idea that the letter was drafted months ago and that somehow changes things now. What's the difference now? If anything, that's more needed now because this thing's escalating. It's getting more and more close to nuclear war. So how is it that that months ago is not? Oh, well, it was months ago, and now it's now it's no longer important to say this. It's no longer needed. It's no longer useful to say we should have peace, to say we should have diplomacy. It's just, what an insane excuse. And then, so after blaming it on her staff that put out this letter without her approval, apparently, which is bullshit, Jayapal said, quote, the letter sent yesterday has been conflated with GOP opposition to support for the Ukrainians, just defense to support for the Ukrainians, just defense of their just defense of their national sovereignty. As such, it is a distraction at the time. I mean, what an immense amount of garbage coming out of as their excuse. So you see what really happened here, and I don't think this is that tough to figure out, even for kind of the layman who it doesn't follow this stuff. Is the so-called progressives, they're not, but they pretend to be, in Congress, put out a letter sheepishly saying there should be some diplomacy in this proxy war. Now, of course, the actual ruling class of America doesn't want diplomacy. They don't want this war to end. They want to fight Russia to the last Ukrainian. They view the Ukrainians as cannon fodder to just be in the middle of this garbage because they view it as harming Russia. And so therefore it's useful to the US empire. So they don't want any diplomacy. But anyway, they put out this letter and they're kind of owners. That doesn't mean they never do anything that's slightly outside of what's might be slightly expected, like this letter. But their owners then came in, gave them a lot of phone calls and a lot of emails. Probably people that donate heavily on their campaigns, probably coming, of course, from Biden and, his chief of staff and Blinken and all these people. And who knows what the threats amount to. The threats may amount to, we will destroy your career. We will fund opposition in the primary. We will, just fundraise the other side, whatever. But the threats clearly worked. And it shows you, for those of you that don't follow this stuff, don't necessarily understand how these systems work, It shows you how little a chance any kind of peace has with the American system. We are inverted totalitarian. Oh God, it's one of those nights, one of those days. Totalitarian system, inverted totalitarian system that is ruled by the anonymous corporate state, and this went against what is allowable, what is inside the Overton window, which includes only supporting endless belligerence, endless war, no diplomacy, not sitting down with other countries and working these things out. It's just amazing. So that being said, let's see. I want to play. I'll play this clip from MSNBC, rehashing a little bit of this, but I'll pinpoint some of the wording by MSNBC that shows their propaganda as well. And of course, that's another one of the threats, right? Is the threat that the mainstream media will turn against them. You know, Jayapal and all the rest, AOC especially, they all need the mainstream media on their side, want the mainstream media on their side. So fearing that they'll turn against them is another problem. So, but here we go.
On Capitol Hill, and they're basically blaming it on a staff error. This is Representative Pramila Jayapal of Washington. She, of course, the chair of the Progressive Caucus, said in a statement today that this was a letter that was drafted over the summer. This is when the situation in Ukraine was much different than it.
How is it much different now? If anything, it's worse. If anything, we need diplomacy now more than ever. What do you mean much different? The fuck are you talking about? Oh, yeah, now we don't need diplomacy. Now we just need all-out war. Now we just need to push ourselves into nuclear Armageddon. Now is the time. Bullshit.
It is today, and that through some miscommunication between members of her staff and members that had signed on to this letter over the summer, that somehow the letter was changed just a little bit and then released. And of course, Andrea, as you rightly point out, this comes after 20.
Changed a little bit. Does anyone honestly believe that any of these people have a staff member who would change a letter that had been signed off on by 30 Democrats and then put it out? Could you imagine being that staff person? Could you imagine you're an underling of Jayapal or one of the others, and you get a letter that has been carefully worded, signed off on by 30 Democrats, there's their signature, and you go, you know what? Let's just change some sentences. I'm going to throw in the word farty pants right there. I'm gonna, you know what? I'm gonna put in a little something about Biden. You should also get your head out of your ass. I'll just put that in the margins. Fucking no. All right. They didn't change any of the wording. All of that is garbage lies. No one put this out without approval. No one changed any wording.
24 hours of swift criticism, particularly from her fellow Democrats, and even those that had signed on to this letter. For instance,
so whether she did or not, let's assume Jayapal did get a bunch of criticism. Shouldn't standing against war be a moral belief that is not open to some garbage other Democrats saying, you can't do this, you can't promote diplomacy? Like, shouldn't it not matter if she gets a phone call from some other pro-war shithead? Like, isn't this a matter of moral certainty? Who cares if someone calls her and says, I don't believe it? Well, sorry. But of course, that's not what these people are, right? They're all politicians.
Representative Ilhan Omar of Minnesota tweeting today that this was something that they were not even informed of, that this letter was going.
The letter they all signed, they weren't informed of. Right.
going to be sent out yesterday. Also, Representative Sarah Jacobs of California echoing those same comments, saying that she was willing to sign on to the letter in the summer and that she would not sign on to it.
Willing to sign the letter in the summer and not now. Fucking why? What? Why?
Today. And of course, Andrea, this is a key political issue for Democrats. They've put some pretty harsh criticism on the House Minority Leader, Kevin McCarthy, for suggesting that should the Republicans win back the majority here in the next several weeks, that the flow of money from the United States to Ukraine in support of their efforts in defending their country may not be guaranteed.
Do you notice that nice little propaganda slipped in there? In their efforts defending their country, in their efforts to fight the proxy war that we have made sure will not have peace, right? I've done multiple segments on how the U.S. actually stopped, U.S. and U.K. stopped the peace process back in April. This whole thing could have been over in April. Zelensky was nearing an agreement with Russia to sign and be done with this fucking war that is killing people and destroying lives. And the US and UK went and stopped that. So keep that in mind. Secondly, he threw in the defending their country as if that's all that's going on here, right? As if there is no proxy war, as if the U.S. isn't trying to drain Russia, as we're also trying to create a proxy war in Taiwan. We just announced the Senate is trying to send billions of dollars to a Taiwanese resistance group. Keep in mind, Taiwan, according to China, is part of China. According to Taiwan government is part of China. And according to the U.S. government official statements is part of China. So there's that. So that'd be like China sending billions of dollars in military aid to Texas to help with secession from the United States. Do you think that might stick in some people's craw?
And Democrats have been very critical of that. So, of course, this letter that suggested that perhaps direct engagement with Russia was a good idea undercuts that messaging on some level. Democrats.
And you have to appreciate the propaganda they've done to have the term direct engagement or diplomacy or working with all seem evil or dastardly or wrong. There were fucking agreements in World War II. There were fucking agreements end most wars, right? Even in World War II, even after Hitler was dead and the Germany surrendered, they still had to meet up and sign something that says we surrender. Like, in every war, just about, it ends with some kind of negotiation at the end. Now, sure, one country may be completely out of options, but it still ends with someone saying, we give up or we give in or we give this part of land or whatever. So the idea of negotiations at some point is clearly just logical. Like, but these people, our media, our government, they have worked hard to make you think that speaking to another country is somehow wrong or evil or idiotic. Like, if we actually believe in what we're doing, then what difference would it make if you speak to Russia, speak to Putin? What, is he such a master manipulator that you just put Tony Blinken? I was going to say Biden, but anyone could manipulate Biden. I mean, you just hold up a little baggie of jujubes and he'd probably do whatever the fuck you want. But they wouldn't send him. They'd send someone like Blinken. Is Putin just so like dastardly that he can just warp your mind when you just walk in a room with him? If anything, this makes it seem like America's pathetic, that we're just weak-willed, not intelligent enough, don't have the courage of our convictions. And if we're put in a room, like if we were put in a room with Kim Jong-un, like when Trump met with him, everybody was like, oh no, he's meeting with him. All is lost. It's like, aren't we able to fucking have our own opinions and meet with these people and actually talk to them? And it's just pathetic. And of course, this is your garbage mainstream media standard response. But okay, so that is what's going on right now with the Progressive Caucus. They have completely abandoned anything that resembles peace in any way. You know, It's a standard for them, standard behavior for them. All right, so I want to move on to another article by Patrick Lawrence. I read from him the other day, and I thought it'd be good to do one more from him because he is saying very important things, and this also relates to what's going on in Ukraine and how it's being used to turn Europe back into feudal states, back into little sniveling vassals underneath us. So this is coming from SheerPost. Patrick Lawrence is a good writer over there at SheerPost. Oh, speaking of SheerPost, someone in the comment thread asked me whether they said there was an email from Truthdig saying Truthdig is going to relaunch. And I used to be a writer for Truthdig. I used to be one of their more popular writers. I don't know anything about it, and I'm not connected to it in any way. And part of the reason that Truthdig went under or whatever, collapsed, was that the publisher, meaning the person funding the thing largely, wanted to get rid of those of us who were truly anti-war and anti-imperialists, like me, Chris Hedges, a couple others. That's part of the reason. I mean, there may have been other internal issues as well, but and Robert Scheer, who is one of the most legendary journalists we have in America, who's actually stuck to his morals and is no longer allowed really on mainstream media, despite having interviewed something like every president up until Obama or Bush or something. So every president going back to like Nixon, not every president. His interview with Lincoln, you should hear it, man. It is fucking groundbreaking. This guy's a little old right now. But anyway, Robert Scheer, famed journalist, used to be with Ramparts magazine, 30 years with LA Times. But he's an example of what needed to get pushed out of mainstream media so that it could just be a pro-war, pro-ruling class entity. He was one of the exceptions, like Robert Scheer, Chris Hedges, Donahue on MSNBC, Jesse Ventura, these anti-war people that had to be forced out of mainstream media so that it could be purely 100% pro-war, pro-capitalist, gut-wrenching destruction of our souls. And he was one of those. Anyway, so he founded and ran Truthdig. I believe he founded it, but, you know, he was the editor-in-chief of Truthdig. So he was forced out. Truthdig basically does nothing for the last several years. And I guess they must be relaunching. Someone said they're relaunching. So anyway, I don't know what they'll be when they relaunch, but I would imagine it will be what they intended to be, which is to get people like me and Chris Hedges off their staff, out of their realm. So I don't know. Oh, another thing before I get to that article I was going to talk about is I'm sure some of you want to know about my my meeting and interview with John Shipton, Julian Assange's father, yesterday. We did a live Q&A in a small theater, and he's promoting the film Ithaca. It's about him and Stella Morris, Julian Assange's wife, and it kind of takes documentary, could you imagine and like they get fucking Hollywood and actors and everything to actually do justice to Assange and Stella Morris and John Shipton. But so he's promoting this film along with others, and you should definitely check it out. I don't actually know if it's available streaming yet. It might be, but anyway, just keep an eye out. It's called Ithaca. Ithaka. And the live interview that I did with him, I should have the video in the next week or so, and I will put that up so you will get to see that. But anyway, just to give you a couple little snippets, John Shipton is doing well. He says Julian's doing okay, as well as you can do in almost solitary confinement in Belmarsh Prison, one of the most notorious prisons in Britain, basically being tortured because solitary confinement, and he has no laptop, he has no he's not allowed to take notes with his lawyers. all these things they do to slowly break someone down. I think in the film, Julian Assange says something like, it feels like his brain is being hacked. Like they're slowly breaking down his brain. But anyway, John Shipton says, thank you to all of you for your support. I know many of you are longtime Assange supporters and you continue the fight. And he and Julian and Stella Morris can't thank you all enough. And they want you to know that. And, I think one of the most important things that's said in the film, as many of you know, the extradition to the U.S., which would basically mean there'd be no fair trial. There's never a fair trial in espionage charges. So if he were to get extradited to the U.S., which he's not a citizen of and has never worked in and WikiLeaks was never founded or part of the United States. So there is no reason for Julian Assange to be in the United States. But if he were shipped to the U.S., they would lock him up forever. Minimum forever. The minimum of what they do to him would be lock him up forever. And the extradition was initially not approved because the judge said he is a suicide risk. He's very depressed and would absolutely, she believed, find a way to kill himself if he were going to be extradited. Then that was overturned by other judges. Now they're appealing that. This process can go on for, I don't know, another couple years possibly. But Stella Morris says in the film that extradition cases are 99% climate and politics and 1% law. There's essentially zero to none. There's essentially little to no law involved. Although they give it all the trappings of law. They have all these lawyers run out there and go, and they pretend, they have their kangaroo court and pretend it's somehow something to do with law, but it doesn't. It comes down to the climate around the trial. And so her point is that the support from you guys is everything. The amount of protest they can get. The other day, they surrounded Parliament with thousands of people came out to support Assange. They've gotten support from all kinds of human rights outlets. He's been nominated for Nobel Prizes. Anyway, Niels Melzer, the UN rapporteur on torture, has written an entire book on the torture of Julian Assange and the persecution of a journalist and publisher, one of the most impressive and successful publishers to ever live. But anyway, I think that's an incredibly important point, that law matters little to none. And really what it comes down to is the pressure that you and I and so many others are able to put around this situation. So I want you to know that, and thank you for all the fight that so many of you are involved in. Okay, so I'm going to do one more story, and then the live stream will continue at rumble.com/Lee Camp. I will give you the link. It is free to watch there. There's no paywall or anything. And the reason half of it is on all these platforms and then the whole thing is at Rumble is because YouTube has deleted my main YouTube channel while they banned it globally. They banned thousands of my videos. I'm the most censored comedian in America. So that is why I'm at rumble.com. All right. Patrick Lawrence. Europe's self-destruction is what we're seeing right now. Western media's determination to ignore the recent Baltic Sea detonation, which knocked out the Nord Stream 1 and 2 gas pipelines, is absolutely remarkable. A major piece of Europe's energy infrastructure, the joint property of Germany and Russia, has been destroyed. And let's be clear, there is no doubt it was blown up by either the U.S. or Ukraine with U.S. weaponry. Any chance that Russian gas transmissions westward will be resumed is off the table. The continent is now sent on a desperate search for new sources of natural gas. sources of natural gas, inevitably at higher prices. The Western press is essentially completely ignoring it. Reuters reported that Sweden has declined to participate in a joint investigation with Germany and Denmark into who blew up the Nord Stream pipelines. There will be no joint investigation of the incident. Whatever Sweden and the others may discover on their own, they have no intention of telling it to the world. Yeah, I mean, and this is a continued. The article goes on to basically say this is a continued subjugation of Europe to the United States. I mean, the U.S. has always been the leading player in NATO, et cetera, ever since World War II. But this, much of Europe was beginning to connect strongly economically with China and Russia, and the U.S. has succeeded with this proxy war in forcing Europe back into a subjugated position that is going to be awful for Europeans. I mean, a lot of people won't have heat this winter. The economies are going to tank. This is going to be ugly, and this is partly by design, but the U.S. is more interested in just cutting off connections between Russia and China and the rest of the world. He says Europe's creeping economic ruin is the most immediate tangible casualty of the war in Ukraine. The U.S. provoked, and the sanctions regime against Russia, the U.S. leads and the European Union backs. The nearly incredible refusal of Germany and its neighbors to stick up for themselves on the pipeline question suggests that the larger consequence is the final collapse of all pretense that Europe is other than a collection of vassal states subservient to the U.S., even at the expense of their own citizens. Think about this the next time the Biden administration bangs on about the sanctity of Ukraine's sovereignty. I know, that's so true. Here our government is running around saying sanctity of Ukraine, sovereignty. They make their own decisions. Meanwhile, we tell them what to do, but still they make their own decisions. Also, Europe better fucking bend down and let us shove our balls in your face. Enjoy that, motherfuckers. He continues, I was long among those who wondered with a certain measure of hope when Europeans would speak up and act according to what they determined was the best for themselves. I spent decades at this. Yes, I remember thinking the continent is done with the Cold War, binary, Washington forced on the world. Yes, I thought more recently Europeans will refuse to support the sanctions Washington imposed on Russia after the U.S. cultivated coup in Ukraine in 2014. German businesses didn't want them. The Greeks and Italians didn't either. But when that came up for renewal every 6 months as required by EU rules, they went through anyway. You know, actually, we're seeing a trend here, aren't we? Europe is kind of similar to the Democratic Progressive Caucus, right? They pretend they're their own humans, their own people, their own governments. But when the U.S. says, no, this is how it is, and fucking back down, they back down. They back down again and again and again. And this is, it's sad to see Europe giving in to this proxy war in such an extreme way. But keep in mind, here's some important facts to keep in mind as you see Europe fall in line for all this, is 80%, over 80% of the world's population is in countries that have not actually fallen in line with this proxy war. They've either sided with Russia or are staying out of it. 80% of the world's population is in countries that are not signing on to the U.S. proxy war. All right. It's also something like 80% of GDP. I believe that I read that as well. Is also outside of signing on to this proxy war. And Also there's some other things we're not told in the U.S. press, which is the most recent polling of Russians. And I don't know how accurate it is. If people want to tell me it's completely not accurate, then okay. But the most recent polling shows that something like 70%, over 70% of Russians support this response in Ukraine. Some of them say they support it. Something like half of that say they support it no matter what, like no matter what ends up needing to be done. And half of them say they support it with reservations of certain things. But still, compare that to the United States, where when was the last fucking military operation the U.S. was in where that many, over 70% backed it? Probably Iraq, probably the invasion of Iraq, like that first year. And that was because of all the lies we were told of weapons of mass destruction. It was also because 9/11 was fresh in our mind. But anyway, it's just interesting that like the vast majority of Russians support this response to NATO's expansion, to the U.S. funding and arming Nazis on their border. And by the way, many Russians, and especially those of them in the Donbass region in Ukraine, believe this war didn't start in February. They view it as starting in 2014 when the U.S.-backed coup happened. U.S.-backed Nazi-powered coups. Those are the best kind. Coming to you from America Inc. All right. Well, definitely check out that full article if you have time. All right, so the other streams will end now, but rumble.com/Lee Camp will continue. I'm going to, in a few minutes, a little later, I'm going to play the new episode of The Most Censored News. I'm also going to get into my ongoing series, Why Capitalism is Unredeemable. And again, if you love capitalism and you want to defend it, then listen to my argument and tell me why it sucks. Don't run away. Don't go, oh, fuck this guy, and turn it off. Fucking watch and tell me why it's wrong. Can't handle that? All right. So here again in the comment section is the link to the Rumble live stream, which will continue. A couple of other notes real quick before I cut off the other streams. I have a podcast called Moment of Clarity. It's been banned by Spotify, but it's still on other podcast platforms. I have another podcast called Common Censored. I have a third podcast called Government Secrets that I do every week. We just did a live one in London, which you should give a listen to. It's free to listen, Government Secrets. Check that out. And Most Censored News. You're about to see a new episode of that. It's actually the episode of Most Censored News that I'm about to play is the largest leak in British political history, has just come out a couple weeks ago, and the mainstream media has done zero on it. The largest leak in British political history, revealing how they took down Jeremy Corbyn, and mainstream media just ignoring it. So I'm going to play an episode with all those details in a minute. And I also will be giving you some good news. Some good news out of Baltimore. I always like to give in some good news, and not just as a good news, but it's a solution for how to fix some shit in this world. All right. So those of you on Facebook, YouTube, and Facebook and YouTube, I bid you farewell, but I hope you'll join me on rumble.com/Lee Camp because it's free there and there's no reason not to. All right. Here we go.